Bank of Canada raised its key interest rate by a quarter of a percentage point this morning, bringing it to 5%. Forecasters were widely expecting the move as the economy continues to run hotter than expected. The central bank says that the rate hike was prompted by elevated demand in the economy and strong underlying inflation pressures. Its updated economic projections suggest that it will take longer to get inflation back to the 2% target. It now expects inflation to stall at around 3% for the next year before steadily declining to 2% by mid-2025. The central bank didn't indicate whether it plans to raise rates again in September and instead said its governing council will continue to monitor how the economy evolves. Well, joining us now to discuss the rate hike is Dr. Moshe Lander, economist and professor at Concordia University. Dr. Lander, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Hello.
Now, this move was anticipated by a lot of economists, and part of the justification for this increase was elevated demand. So, Dr. Lander, what is elevated demand and why is it so hard to tame?
So when demand exceeds supply, whether we're talking about for an economy or whether we're talking about for Taylor Swift concerts, prices tend to rise. So what we have going on right now is that demand within the economy continues to exceed what supply is able to match. And so there's upward pressure on prices. That's inflation, where we would normally accept that demand can outstrip supply to push up prices by about 2% a year. The 3.5% is considered to be too much. And so that need to rein in spending through higher interest rates is to try and match demand and supply better.
And officials have been quite surprised by the resilience of the Canadian economy amid these rate hikes, even amid concerns around a potential recession by some analysts. So why has Canada's economy continued to stay so strong, Dr. Lander?
So one possible explanation is that our population continues to grow at a rather rapid clip. A few weeks ago, right, the big news story was when we crossed over the $40 million Canadian or 40 million Canadian threshold. Now what we have is that these people that are coming into the country are bringing with them, of course, demand, hungry stomachs, need for housing, and they're bringing spending with them. And so all of that is pushing up prices. It's not to say that immigration is a bad thing. It's just that supply can't keep pace with it. And so that continues to put this extra pressure on the economy and on the inflation level.
All right, Dr. Lander, now let's talk a little bit about variable rate mortgages. So are we potentially nearing a tipping point where we're going to see maybe an uptick in insolvencies?
Well, every time the interest rate goes up, we increase the risk or at least maybe the number of insolvencies, right? So there were probably people that at the beginning of this interest rate cycle 18 months ago had just taken out the maximum mortgage that they could afford, stretched themselves to the limit at those record low interest rates. And when interest rates just went up that initial 25 basis points, that probably ensnared a few people. But as it keeps going up and up, it's going to catch more and more people. So I don't know that it's necessarily going to lead to an abnormal number of increases in insolvencies, but yeah, it's going to catch more people. Interest rates have gone up essentially 5 percentage points in 18 months. That's enough to make anybody pause.
Definitely. Now, with the forecast for inflation to stall at around 3% for the next year, do you think that the Bank of Canada might include another rate hike in the upcoming future?
Yeah, they have 3 meetings left this year, one in September, one in October, one in December. I would probably now say that there's a good bet that at least one of those is going to include an interest rate increase. It was foolish of them to say that they were going to have inflation back to 2% by the summer of this year. At the earliest, I didn't think that this was possible before the beginning of 2024. They're now saying 2025, so even that's beyond what I would have projected. But the reality is that it was a foolish target to begin with. And so any extra increases in interest rates are because they feel that inflation might be stalling and they continue to need to discourage Canadians from spending excessively, like we said at the outset.
And on that note, why is the Bank of Canada's target rate at 2%, Dr. Lander? Should that target maybe be adjusted?
No, 2% is the right number, and that pretty much goes for any major economy around the world. If I can use an outdated analogy, the idea that a little bit of grease is good for the wheel is kind of the way that we need to view inflation within an economy. If you give too much inflation, as we saw, it creates chaos and confusion and panic, and people get really frustrated if the inflation rate is too high. But if you make the inflation rate too low, the economy is not going to be able to move forward. So it's that analogy that you put too much grease on the wheel, it just spins and doesn't go anywhere. Don't put enough, the wheel cracks and it falls apart. So you need just a little bit of inflation to keep it humming along. Anything less than 2 would be insufficient. More than 2, and you risk this escalating inflation that if we believe it's going to be 3% now, we start asking for 3%, and next thing you know, we actually have 4% inflation, and it takes off from there.
All right, Dr. Lander, always great having you on Forum Daily. Thank you again for your time.
Anytime.